Okay, so first off, I want to thank you for coming out here with us, especially last night. And if you would have stuck around, we finished very early last night, right?
In the morning.
We finished 5 minutes after you left, we wrapped up the evening.
Yeah.
But we had a good time. I definitely appreciate you coming out. We've been looking forward to this interview for quite some time.
Thank you very much, Patrick.
And what I want to start off with, this is very interesting and exciting because we've been talking about this day coming for quite some time. We've been talking about you coming out here and us getting a chance to having the honor and the privilege of Senator Rick Santorum attending this event and going through some different things that's going on in America right now with challenges. But first, before we go through some of the questions, I just want to open it up with the most important question of the day tonight is, what did you think about the debate last night?
I thought it provided some insights to me. I didn't obviously know any of the gentlemen that were up there, but I felt like I have some insights into all of them. Frankly, their strengths as well as their weaknesses. I think were on display. No offense, guys, but it showed in many cases. I mean, a couple of the folks, it showed their tremendous heart. At the same time, I would say that it showed maybe you need a little bit more on your communication skills in being able to handle some awkward questions that maybe you weren't ready for. And instead of a couple of the guys I noticed, instead of taking a step back and thinking about what you're going to say, just started answering. And it was pretty clear you didn't know what you wanted to say. And so I would love the opportunity to meet with each one of them and just sort of give them a little pointers, because I think all of them showed tremendous strengths in many areas, but to me there were some areas that very, very easy things to turn around and make them even stronger leaders.
How often you see companies trying to develop the next breed of leaders?
That was what's great about this. I mean, I don't know what you were planning on doing in talking to these guys, but I strongly recommend that you do take some time with them and walk through both their strengths and weaknesses. I tend, and this is one of my weaknesses as a manager, I tend to focus on the weaknesses because that's me. I'm always very critical of myself and always trying to improve. And people say, oh, they like something. I don't really care to hear that. I just want to know what I did wrong. I don't really care. If I did it right, fine, let's move on.
That's right.
But it's important, particularly to some people, to affirm their strengths and to remind them, how important those strengths are in their success, as well as trying to counsel them as to how they can get better.
Who impressed you the most?
I would say different people, different ways. And I would say probably the young fellow on the end, George, right? And for two reasons. Number one, because he is so young. I mean, you told me he was 25, right? Certainly maturity beyond those years was apparent. And the thing that I think set him apart to me, and I mentioned this to you after the debate, I was where he was on the end for 16 of the 20 debates. I was the guy at the end of the line who got very few questions, who had to sort of fight for whatever time I had during the presidential debates. And when I did get questions, they weren't the questions I wanted. They were questions on, abortion or something else, that were not sort of the core issues that were being discussed in the campaign. And so I was out there in the end being frustrated and somewhat angry at times because I didn't feel like I was getting my fair share. And I remember during one of those debates, I was being a bit petulant in some of my answers because, again, I felt like I was getting the wrong questions and not much time. And just had finished, and we were on these breaks. Unlike what you did last night, they have breaks. They have commercial breaks during these debates. And my wife, just like I know most of the folks had wives up there and significant others last night, I would always walk down and it'd be a couple steps and say hi to my wife and get a little pep talk or whatever. And I walked over and she looked at me as steely-eyed as she's ever has, and said one word to me: chill. And that was to me a transition moment in my campaign. She just said, "You are just way too intense. People want to like you. And you're a wonderful, likable guy, and nobody thinks you are by the way you're acting up there. Just don't let these moderators and all this get you, wrapped around the axle. Be yourself, and smile and be the happy warrior." And really, from that point on, that was sort of a change. And to me, George last night was the happy warrior. Very combative when he had to be, but he had a smile on his face. He was engaging. And had the disposition of a leader that you wanted to follow. And that's why he impressed me.
Interesting. I appreciate you sharing that with us. But tell us a little bit about yourself, how your whole career got started from the beginning.
I came up got involved in politics when I was in college. It was in the 1970s, and late 70s when I went to college, and sort of felt that was the thing you do. I grew up in the 60s and early 70s during the Vietnam War, and the idea was that when you get to college and you got active and involved, that's what they did. Well, I was a little short on that. By the time I got to college, everybody had stopped being involved. The war was over. Everybody had sort of moved on to something else, and I didn't quite recognize that, I guess. I was a little behind the times, and got active and involved in politics. I mean, I came from a very middle-income background. My parents worked for the Veterans Administration. We lived in government housing for the first 18 years of my life, and thought I was living in a palace. I thought it was the greatest thing in the world. We were living in old World War II barracks that were built during the war, and it was a great. I was very blessed. I had a mom and dad who loved me, and a brother and a sister, and felt like we had a very stable home environment, and faith was very important to us. So I felt like I had a great foundation for my life, and went to college and just decided to get involved in politics because I felt it mattered. I was a very competitive person. I love sports. I know there's some sports guys up there last night. I love sports, but I'm a terrible athlete. And so it was one of those frustrating things that I would try, and I'd make the junior varsity team, or I'd be at the end of the bench on the varsity team, and and half the time I'd only get picked for the team only because I tried harder than everybody else, not because I was any good. And so I was sort of the model of the guy who worked hard and sort of rewarded the guy for just his effort, not his skills. And I found that politics was an area that was very similar to sports. And name anything in your life where you work towards something, and then on a certain day, at a certain moment, you find whether you win or lose. That's not how life is. Life is a continuing progression of successes and failures, and improvements and not. But you don't win or lose very often in life, if you will. And the nice thing about a sporting event, at the end of the 9 innings or at the end of 4 quarters or whatever, you have a winner and a loser. You have a champion. You're not. It's not how life is. I mean, you have an MVP here, but it's a continuum. I mean, as you said, you're going to find out who the real Titan is in 10 years, and maybe 20 years, and maybe 30 years. There's no definitive time. And so I always was inspired by the fact that you had, in politics, you had a winner and a loser. And unlike sports, who won the World Series in 1985? Nobody remembers, but you know who won the presidency, and why, because it matters. It really doesn't matter whether the Cardinals won or the Giants won, but it matters who wins the election, because it affects you, all of us in this country. And so I felt that was a way for me to get involved in something that I love the competition, love the energy and the focus, and having put an organization together to accomplish a goal, and knowing at that point of the election whether you won or lost, and then having something consequential result from it, which is the policies that you promoted.
So here's a question, since you brought that up. How important is competition? Because sometimes competition gets a black eye. Because if you compete, you may lose, and if you lose, it's going to hurt, it's going to be painful, people are going to say things about you, it's embarrassing.
Yeah.
How important is competition for all of us?
I'll make a couple of comments on that. Number one, I have kids. Karen and I are blessed. We're raising 7 children. And, right? Good? Come on. We feel blessed, and we have kids who are in competitive things, just like I'm sure many of you. One of the things that drive me crazy is when you see these competitions and you have 6 teams in a little league, and they give out prizes for the top 5 or something like that. I mean, everybody gets an award. That's not America. Not everybody wins, and it's okay for not everybody to win. And it's because you learn. I always say the greatest thing about America is that we permit people to fail. And one of the concerns I have about this country is that we are blurring the lines between success and failure. That we're punishing success, we're rewarding failure. And look, Karen and I have a child who's disabled. And so I understand you have to have programs there to make sure that you take care of those who cannot provide for themselves. But we're destroying generations of Americans by not allowing them to fail and fall. I can tell you, I've won races, I've lost races. And without question, I've learned more from the losses. I've become a better person because of the losses. And in fact, I think one of the reasons I lost, my first race, when I lost, I'd won 2 House races and 2 United States Senate races before I lost a race. And I think one of the reasons I lost is because I had never lost. And I allowed myself, and
Wow.
this is a very important thing for all of you to understand. Success is a wonderful thing. And I know it makes you feel good, and it's affirming to you, but it also can be a poison. It can make you think that you're better than you are. You lose humility. One of the greatest virtues that I think in this country is lacking is humility. And for me, my wife is always great. I mean, she always tried to keep me humble, but it was hard. It was hard. And it definitely was something that was one of the reasons that led to my defeat when I lost my Senate race back in 2006. And I think it is something that that we undervalue as a society, which is understanding, yes, our strengths, but understanding that humility is an important part of our relationships with others, how we see others, that we are here to serve, not be served. We are here to affirm, not be affirmed. And we need to have that type of servant attitude, not just in our business, not just in politics, but for our country to be successful, we have to have that attitude. And I think that's a missing quality.
It's interesting you say that. One of the things you talked about when I asked the question, tell me about yourself, how you got into politics. You always hear how dirty politics is. Politics is so dirty. So should people really make an effort to learn about politics? Is it important for all of us here who were not involved in politics? Should we learn the basis about politics, what works, what doesn't?
I would say politics is no dirtier than any other area of life. I saw it got pretty nasty up here last night. I mean, there were some times it was pretty intense, and yeah, there are politics in every profession. There's politics. I mean, whether it's education or in business, I mean, can't ignore politics is just interactions, is personal interactions. I mean, there's always there's always some jockeying for position. Politics, public life. Our country is a great country, yes, because of business, yes, because of entrepreneurs, yes, because of great people of great accomplishment. But there are a lot of people who have those qualities in other countries around the world, and they don't succeed, and the public doesn't benefit from them because the system of government isn't in place that allows you to be able to pursue your dreams and to reap the benefits of your labor. America is unique in the world, and every generation has an obligation to maintain that opportunity for the next generation. And the idea that freedom and the quality of life and the kind of country that we've had in America, warts and all, but that we've had in America, is not guaranteed. It only happens if people engage and fight for freedom in every generation. And I make the argument, and the reason I ran for president last time, is that I think we're at a tipping point. This country became the greatest country in the history of the world because of certain foundational principles. And the foundational principle, the biggest foundational principle, in my opinion, that makes America different than the rest of the world and unique, is that our rights do not come from the government. They come from our Creator. And now that's a cliche, and you've probably heard that said many, many times, but it is everything. If the government is in the position of telling you what rights and privileges you have, then you are not free. You are dependent upon them for what you get. And that is what every government in the history of the world prior to the United States was like. Now, they didn't necessarily have republics, in other words, the people governing, but they had kings and monarchs who did what was in the best interest of the people. I use an example. I'm doing a documentary on this that's coming out in next month, where I talk about the founding documents, the Declaration of Independence, which is where those words, we hold these truths, another word that's not used often in politics anymore. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal and endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights. That is America. People say, well, how do you define America? You define French by their ethnicity, the Bulgarians by their ethnicity, the Russians, the Chinese. David, you can go to France and spend 50 years there. You'll never be French. I can go to Russia and spend 50 years. I'll never be Russian. But a Russian and a Frenchman can step on American soil, accept the ideal of what America is, and be an American.
That's so special.
And America is about something. And that's what people forget when they say, oh, politics doesn't matter. Yes, it does, because it is who we are. And I would make the argument that who we are is very much in doubt right now. And I use the example of the revolution in America, 1776, the Declaration of Independence. We said who we are. This is who we are, a people of God and that have rights. And we fought a revolution to separate ourselves from a king so we could exercise those rights. Government would be limited. People would be free. We would be able to create a country for the first time in the history of the world from the bottom up. Free people pursuing their own dreams. That's why they said, if you continue on that declaration, these unalienable rights, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Life, the fundamental right. Alive, you're not alive, obviously you don't have, nothing else really matters. Liberty, to be able to do without government telling you what to do, right? So freedom from government oppression. But it's also not just freedom from, it's freedom for. Because they use the term pursuit of happiness. And this is something I learned on the campaign trail. That if you go out and look at the definition of happiness at the time of our founders, and you read the literature and what they wrote about, there were all sorts of philosophers who were writing about these basic fundamental rights, and they used life, liberty, and property. That's what was written throughout 100 years of thought prior to the revolution. But our founders said, no, that's insufficient, because having life, having the right to life, and having liberty to pursue your dreams is not just about getting stuff. It's more than that. And so they said the pursuit of happiness. Happiness was defined at the time of our founders is doing what God's will is in your life, because that's what leads to happiness. Doing what you ought to do, not what you want to do. So at the essence of America is this God-given rights of these liberties to pursue what you ought to do, to order your life in a way that is consistent with God's will for you in your life. America is a moral enterprise. At the same time of the American Revolution was another revolution, the French Revolution. There was great hope and promise here in America. Jefferson went to France. I mean, they thought this was going to be a great thing, that the French were going to have a similar revolution as America. But they had no Declaration of Independence. They had a phrase that was the bulwark of their revolution: liberty, equality, and fraternity. Liberty is good. We have that. Equality, all men are created equal. Good. Fraternity. Everybody know what is a fraternity in college, right? brotherhood, not fatherhood. Rights came from the government, from each other, not from God. It was a secular, godless revolution, anti-clerical. And it led within a year to the reign of terror and the guillotine. Because once you get away from the fact that each one of us are created by a loving God and have rights because we are a creation of God, not because the government says so. When the government now is in the position of the majority being able to force upon the rest of the country what they believe the right should be, tyranny is around the corner. And so when I say that our country hangs in the balance right now, and to be involved in politics at this time is a noble and important calling, we need to understand how fundamental the debate in America is today when it comes to who we are and what we will be.
So here's a follow-up on that. So I was raised in a Middle Eastern family. I lived in Iran. So Iran was, you can call it dictatorship, and then my mother's family came from Russia, so you got communism, then you have socialism, then we go to Germany, live there for 2 years, then we come to America, you got republic. So by the time I was 18 years old, my opinions about politics and life were created a lot through parents, personal experiences, what took place, and too many times I think that opinion stays like that till 60 for some folks, some of us, right? What would you say to somebody that's sitting out there saying, okay, I see what you're saying, I watch TV, well, I like you, or I don't like you, or I like the left, or I like the right, I like this president, I like that president. How does one get clear on their opinion based on what works rather than an opinion during a dinner party of what somebody said?
This is one of the real vexing things that I have to deal with, which is you see so many people that I've interacted with throughout the course of politics that just simply don't want to hear it. They don't want to hear another point of view. They are completely made up that what they were raised on, or what what their educational experience was, or their life experience, and that's what they are, and that everybody disagrees with them is wrong or evil or bad. And I'm not just saying that me experiencing that. I'm sure that the same is true from the other way, that you have people who are sort of myopic. And part of the problem is in America, the formation of the mind in America has not been what it should be. I mean, I talked about the Declaration, and the essential element of the Declaration is we hold these truths. Truth. We used to be a people that pursued truth. We're hungry for it, really, and questioned it. I mean, and it's very, very important for you to do so, to question what you believe and to seek the truth. And can we know the truth? And there, obviously there are people, and lots of them in academic institutions don't believe truth exists. Believes everything is relative. One thing can be better than the other, but there really is no right or wrong. There really is no truth. Obviously, I don't believe that is the truth. And I believe you can discern right from wrong. And I think you can and must be a warrior for truth. Open your mind up, listen to different points of view, take them and try to reason. That's another area of a lot of work that needs to be done. It's just educating people on reason and using sort of a very methodical approach to try to get down as to what does reality reflect. I know I'll get a little partisan here for a second. Well, not partisan, but ideological here for a second. Margaret Thatcher talked about socialism, and Margaret Thatcher said that socialism works until you run out of other people's money. And if you think about it, though, think about socialism, which is the idea that everybody works sends the money, a big chunk of the money to the state, and then it's redistributed to basically people based upon their needs and wants, and the government has a lot more say about, the idea of making sure that nobody gets too high and nobody gets too low and everybody sort of ends in the middle. How many of you, as individuals, operate your life from a socialistic point of view? In other words, you go out and you work hard and you do the things and you gain things, and then you step back and you say, well, I'm going to make sure that my neighbor who isn't working hard, and I'm going to give them something. Or your friend is going to give them something. How many do we literally operate from the standpoint as individuals based on that model? There are no socialists. There are very few people. There may be some, but there are very few people, unless you can afford to do it, and there are very rich people who do give their money away, but they didn't act that way until they got their money. But if you're making money, you're out there making ends meet, you're not going to say, well, I'm going to do with a lot less so I can give money to others who aren't working as hard as I am. But that's how socialism works. And I would make the argument, again, just from analyzing it from the standpoint of truth and how it works in practice, that it doesn't work, because that's not how people operate. That when you, there was a study done on kids who, it's getting grades at school. And if you worked hard and you got an A, you didn't get an A. That you got points taken away from you if you did so well and given to people who didn't do well to make sure that nobody failed. And after a while, nobody did well. Why? Because it wasn't worth working hard to do well. Why would you work hard and get an A if all you're going to do is help someone who doesn't work hard? And if you don't work hard, you're going to get a decent grade and graduate anyway. The same thing works in practice in the world and the economy today. And so I think it is important to look at what's going on in public life today, what's going on in the world of politics and the world of government today, and just try to discern whether, if you take this policy to its logical end, whether it will work. I can get into a real controversial, I get into the issue of gay marriage, which I know is probably way off. But if you take it to its logical end, if that becomes the norm, how does society survive? So you just need to look at these things and say, if this is how we're going to run life, if this is going to be the norm, if this is the truth, then if we apply it across society, how does society look? And you say, well, wait a minute, that won't work. But we don't do that. We tend to say, well, I feel bad for this person. We let emotions are good, but you can't make public policy. You can't run your life based on how you feel about something. You have to look at it more objectively and dispassionately, see what works, and then of course there's always time for emotion, there's always time for caring and giving and things like that, but you have to set a template as to what works for making a society grow and prosper.
Let's shift gears to what you talked about a little earlier, where growing up, faith was very important in your life, and it still is till today. How important does faith play in our lives? And not only that, maybe even how important does church play in the lives of all of us in America? What would America be without faith? What would America be without the church down the street that you and I can go on a Sunday?
I think what has made America the greatest country in the history of the world is just that, is that we are a country that is full of faith. I always say, there are more people who go to church on Sunday in America than attend all the professional sporting events in America in a year, every Sunday. And that is not true in Europe. That is not true in just about any other country in the world. We are unique, and to me, it's the key to our success, that we are a country, because we are a faith-filled country. Obviously, there are people of no faith, there are people of weaker faith, etc. But by and large, we are a country that accepts certain basic premises, God-given rights, and that we are here for a purpose. we have a purpose because we have a God who has a purpose for us in life. And we have an obligation because of our faith to do his will and to serve others. We're a Judeo-Christian country. And so we have an obligation to love our neighbor and to serve our fellow man. And this is sort of the template of America. And when you see that under assault, you say, well, how is it under assault? Well, the reason I believe America is a great faith-filled country is unlike the European countries we came from, we don't have a state church. We have freedom of religion. Not freedom from religion, freedom of religion. Freedom of religion is being transformed by some to freedom from religion. We're going to take it away from it, even push it away and get it out of the public square, get it out of the discussion, push it into a private matter. That's not freedom of religion. That's government freeing you from religion, which I think is a very, very harmful thing. We are a moral enterprise. Our laws are a reflection of our morality. I'm sure you've heard people say, government shouldn't get involved in morality. Almost every single vote I ever cast in the House or Senate had a moral component to it. How much do you tax somebody? There's an economic component to it, but there's a moral component to it. How much do you give to somebody? How do you take money from there and give to there? Is there a moral component? You bet there's a moral component to it. Everything we do, our laws are a reflection of our collective morality. When we say it is wrong to kill, that's a moral decision. There's nothing objectively wrong. If you talk to there's a guy named Peter Singer, who's an ethicist at Princeton University, who has made the case now for quite some time that it is morally good to kill children up until a year's age if they are not normal, if they have any kind of disability, that they should be killed for their sake and for society's sake. Now you say, well, that is outrageous. Is it? If you look at our criminal justice system, we saw these horrible murders in Aurora, Colorado. Everybody is appalled and aghast. But if you look at how the criminal justice system treats murder, it treats it differently based on how old the victim is. If that victim of a murder is a child who is just a few days old, a few hours old, and the mother commits infanticide, in other words, kills her baby, there's almost no mother in America has ever been sent to jail for doing that. Ever. As horrible as it sounds, never. Yet, if that baby is 6 months old, throw the book at him. So we already, in America, look at people at the end of life, mercy killings, euthanasia, people with disease. If you kill someone who's very, very sick, chances are you're not going to get much of a sentence. We already, in America, start making value judgments. Why? Because we are relaxing our standard of what is true, what is right, what is moral. So I would make the argument that America is great because we have a clear sense of right and wrong. We have a clear sense of justice and equality, all of it based on the Judeo-Christian principles. People forget that, but it's true. People talk about equality. Where's the term equality? Where does equality come from? Look at any other religion in America, in the world. Not equality between men and women. Not equality between all people. Very few faiths have that equality in them. It's because we are a Judeo-Christian country that the idea that all men are created equal is something that we can accept. The idea that women are equal to men, not true in most civilizations outside of the West. But we accept that as a reality. Why? Is it objectively true that Patrick and I are equal? No, we are not equal. He is much smarter than I am. I'm better looking than he is. But look at the person next to you. Are you equal to that person? Objectively, if you throw out faith, throw out the fact that all men are created equal, you throw out any God-given rights, throw it let's from a humanistic level, biologically, Chemically, are you equal? Of course not. Of course not. What makes us accept the very principles that we live our lives on is faith, is these tenets of which Western civilization in America is founded upon. And there are those who want to discard them, throw them out, get them out of the public discussion, get morality and any objective truth out of the public square, and let those who are in power decide what's right. I believe that is the great challenge of this generation, to resist that temptation and to stand for truth.
Let's talk about family. Who teaches morals and value to the kids? Whose responsibility is it? Is it government's responsibility to dictate, how a kid should be raised and what things they should be thinking, what values should be their priority? Is it parents?
Yeah, I obviously have very, very strong opinions on this. It's freedom of religion. It's liberty, properly understood, which is freedom with responsibility. And when it comes to the education of your children and the forming of your children, I think most Americans still believe it is the responsibility of the parents and, of course, the church, to the extent that people are involved in the church. Every child is born, I don't know, I assume many of you have children. Were your children born good? Mine weren't. My children were not born good. They learned what was right and what was wrong. They were formed by you as parents, by their environment, schools, church. That formation process is everything. And for me, the government should stay the heck out of it and allow parents the responsibility to do it. The problem is that in America today, most parents don't think it's their responsibility anymore. And they think it's somebody else's job. Particularly, they think it's the school's job. They think that, when you reach a certain age, depending on where you are, whether it's early start or head start or preschool or kindergarten or first grade, whatever it is, that at some point, you sort of wash your hands, you drop the kid off, and it's now, somebody else's responsibility to educate your children. It is not. Each and every parent in America has the responsibility to educate your children, period. It is not the government's. Now, that doesn't mean that all of you have to homeschool your kids, but you have to understand that when you are talking to your children, and there's lots of studies on this, when you're talking to your children anywhere from 15 minutes to a half an hour a day, and the school has your kids for 6 to 8 hours, who's raising your kids? And the average amount of time that in America that a person spends in church is average now, because people don't go to church. It's 10 minutes a week. So the average child in America, 5.5 hours a day on an iPad, iPod, computer, Game Boy, whatever, you name it, in front of a screen, having Hollywood and the entertainment industry in America form their moral imagination. We saw this the other night in Aurora, Colorado. The moral imagination of your children is being shaped by anybody but you, unless you assert that responsibility and assert yourself in that. And it's hard. Look, it's hard. And you will not be popular with your kids. I got 2 of my boys. I'll be happy to call them in here and tell you how unpopular I am at times. But it is a struggle, and that's the sad thing, that it is such a struggle that society and the culture and the government are not on your side. The church is on your side. They can help through their ministry programs and things like that. But I always find it, I wrote a book called It Takes a Family. And it was in response to Hillary Clinton's book she wrote a while back called It Takes a Village. And I believe it takes a family to raise a child, not a village. That Yet if you look at government and what they're doing, the two institutions that are most under assault now in the culture and in education and in government are the family and the church. Both are under assault right now. Both are being dissembled. I shared this number with David last night. Back in 1975, 71% of people in America were married over the age of 18. It is now 51%. And it will go below 50%. That trend is continuing because it's accelerating. Yet, if you look at the people who are successful in America, people who are at the top 20% of income earners, not the top 1%, the top 20%, people who are making $100,000, generally $100,000 or high double digits and above. The percentage of them that are married, not 51%, 85%. Now, what does that tell you about the rest of America? They're way below 50. And it is, in fact, that way. The lower the income you are, the less probability you will be married. The assault on the family is an assault on those who are on the margins of society, those who are trying to make it as a single parent and finding it just impossible. Why? Well, because it's harder to do with one what God made to do with two. It's easier. There's an article in the New York Times just this week. I'd look it up. I think it was last Saturday, and written by a liberal reporter. His wife was actually was in the Clinton and now in the Obama administration. He wrote an article about two women, work at the same place, similar jobs. One's a little higher paying than the other. And they talked about how a woman who went home, who was married, husband had a job, they have a couple of kids, living very comfortable middle-income life, advantages that go with it. The other woman, who's her best friend, is a single mom on food stamps, struggling to make ends meet. It's not about the job. It's about marriage. It's about the culture. It's about family. And we don't have politicians in America talking about that. We as Americans don't talk about it. Why? Because we don't want to judge anybody. I'm not judging single moms. Single moms are the most heroic people in this country, in my opinion. I'm judging a society that does not promote fatherhood and marriage, that does not promote what is good for children, what is good for wives, what is good for husbands. When I was in Wisconsin, a state senator came up and told me that he looked at analysis of a mother who has two kids, who was making $15,000 a year. She was eligible in the state of Wisconsin for $38,000 in government benefits. If she married, now she's a single mom with two kids, if she were to marry a husband that was working, she would lose all those benefits. So her husband, the person she has to marry, in order for her to stay economically the same, would have to be making $60K a year. Now, what is the government doing? They're trying to help, but are they? What happens is mom ends up living with the boyfriend, and we all know the bad situations that happen in that case. It is all well-intentioned, but we have to have policies that promote family and marriage and fatherhood and responsible family life, and we don't.
Before you clap, I want you to see, it's all well-intentioned, but what works is the key.
And I don't mean to say that everybody who put these programs together to try to help moms are doing it because they deliberately wanted to separate fathers from their mothers, and what we've done to men in this culture. I know this is not a popular thing to say. I'm going to get in trouble for this, but that's okay. What we've done to men in this culture by saying basically you're not needed. Men need to be needed. Okay? Men need to feel important. Men are different than women. Women from Venus and Mars, all that, it's true. And when we say, Dad, you know what, you'll be okay. In fact, your kids may be better off financially if you're not around because you're not working or you've got problems. We're doing more harm than good. And we just need, and I've talked about it also last night, what we do to boys in our education system. There's a book written a few years ago called A War on Boys. We have an educational system that is geared toward girls and the way girls learn, not the way boys learn. I have boys and girls. And if I sat my boy, my Patrick, I have a Patrick. If I sat my Patrick and my daughter Sarah Marie, who are about 4 years apart, if I sat them in a room and started teaching them, within a half hour, my son Patrick is not there anymore. I mean, he's just fidgeting, he's got to get up, and my Sarah Marie will sit there for 3 hours. No problem. We expect boys to act like girls when they're young, and they're not. And we beat them up. We tell them they're bad. We tell them they have ADD. We tell them we have all these problems, right? They're boys. And you just heard your economist say, looking at the labor market, what is the majority of people in college right now? Women. What is that doing to the men in society? What is it doing to men in society who don't feel that they're now in a position to be providing, to be needed, to be relevant? They find relevance somewhere else, and it isn't good. It's not good. These are big societal problems, and you say, well, what can we do about them? How about talking about it? How about being truthful about it? How about trying to, I'm not looking for Washington, D.C. to solve these problems, but how about just having a real discussion with the American people about what we need to do to get our country back in a way that's good and productive again for everybody.
Very awesome. You know, you talked about boys and men. Jason Graziani, you had a chance to speak to yesterday. One of his biggest missions with this bit. Where's Jason at? Is he even in the room? I think he's probably out there doing a video or something like that. Jason's over there. One of the things with Jason's mission is turning boys to men. And if you were to see the guys that they're developing in AIB, always working on developing strong men. But going back to what we were talking about earlier with last night, Chris said, we're going to ask this question from you tomorrow, right? And that was a lot of concern right now with government and free enterprise and business. What role do they play, and how should the government be involved with business or shouldn't be involved in business?
This was one of the things that I went into politics and was surprised at what I saw when I got into politics, and as to how those in Washington saw the role of government with respect to business. When I was growing up, I mean, I looked at the Republican Party and the Democratic Party, and I'd say, well, the Republican Party is a party of big business, the party of, folks who did well, and, free enterprise, and, Democrat Party was the party of the little guy and the worker and all this kind of stuff. And I found that really wasn't the case. I mean, there certainly are things that you could say that fit that stereotype. But what I found is that the folks on the left were not the party of the worker. I mean, that's not to say they didn't do things that were consistent with what they thought was beneficial to workers. But what I found is that they were the party of big. And the idea that there are smart people in this country who are better able to plan and decide things than allowing sort of everybody else to do it on their own. And I say that in that big, and I'm talking about big government, clearly, but also big business. What I found was that big business likes big government. Big business, the big corporate giants, were for Obamacare. They were for, some of these financial services regulations that were just put in place. They're for all of these big government controls over the private sector, because it's a competitive advantage for them. They're big in themselves. They have big corporate compliance departments. They can handle the regulatory burden much more efficiently than their competitors who are small. If you're a one-man shop or a two-man shop and you get regulations that thick on how to comply with Dodd-Frank as a financial services advisor, you are just, I've talked to folks in the mortgage business and financial services business, say I'm spending 40-50% of my time just figuring out regulatory-wise what I'm supposed to do and complying with regulations, and I'm not selling my product, I'm not improving my workforce, I'm not doing the things that I need to be doing. Well, if you've got a big corporate compliance department at a big corporation, you've got folks and you've got a small percentage of your budget, you can go do that, and then your people can go out and compete. And so what I found was that it's a sort of almost a sinister coalition between very big business and people who believed in big government and government control who are pushing a lot of these things forward. And that what I believe in, and what I hope the future of conservatives and Republicans are about, is being for the little guy, is being for the entrepreneur, the small business guy, against the regulations, against the micromanagement, against the high rates of taxation. The reason that we have had this sense in America that America is the land of opportunity, it's because we have always had the ability for a person to go out in their garage and start a business or to start from scratch and be able to rise. That's what makes America different than other countries in the world. Most people, if you go to other countries, larger developed countries, very, very high percentage of the workforce works for big corporations or the government. Here in America, that's still not the case because we have this entrepreneurship. Yet, that is being lost. It's being lost. There was a study done a couple of years ago that looked at two things. Number one, the ability for people to rise in society. In other words, income mobility, people who can rise from the bottom to the top. And in America, we still are tops when it comes to people being able to go from the bottom to the very top. Where we suffer and do not do as well as Europe is people moving up from one group to another. Okay, that small changes in. Yet, if you ask people in this country, where's the land of opportunity? It's here. If you ask people in Europe, where's the land of opportunity? They'll say it's here. But increasingly, that's not the case. And so, for me, the more we become like Europe, and with more and more government control of different sectors of our economy and micromanaging those sectors, everything from what mortgage you can get to what health plan you can get, the less freedom, the less opportunity, the less ability for people to be able to start their own and rise. And ultimately, that's the end of America.
Sometimes, I remember we lived in Iran and we had a pretty good life and everything was good. And one day we hear the alarm. It's me, my mom, my dad, my sister, and we start being bombed. And one day, a couple hundred bombing in one day, and we escaped and lived in Karaj. And then from there we escaped, came to America and all this stuff. But as a child, sometimes you think, well, we're never going to lose our freedom because everything's going to be here forever. Now we're in America, and at one point, Iran used to be one of the top countries in the world for tourism, and they don't have that anymore right now. I don't know if you and I are going to go to Iran anytime soon for going and checking out the beaches.
Not with this regime, I can tell you. They're not particularly friendly toward me.
But I think the question really is that I ask, and I would be curious to know what your answer would be with this. Is our freedoms automatically guaranteed for us, our kids, forever to come, or is it something that constantly needs to be fought for and earned generation after generation after generation?
When I was campaigning, I would always quote Ronald Reagan. He gave a speech that said that America is, only one generation removed from losing our freedom. That freedom is the challenge, preserving freedom is the challenge of every generation. I've got a book coming out in October called American Patriots. It tells the story of 25 people that, frankly, I'd never heard of, that were, tremendous, ordinary people during the Revolution who did extraordinary things to win our freedom. And I do it within the framework of the Declaration of Independence. And at the end of the Declaration of Independence, imagine what these folks did. These were, some of the most, powerful people, wealthiest people in America, who signed a letter committing treason, saying that they were going to separate themselves from their government and conduct a revolution. And they risked all that. And at the end of that document, they said, "We pledge our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor." And if you read those founders in subsequent generations, that was something that was continually repeated throughout American history, that every generation has the obligation to pledge their lives, their fortunes, and their sacred honor, because it is natural for people. We see it, you mentioned Russia, you mentioned Iran. I mean, it is natural for folks to want to be taken care of, have the easier way out. You know, do you take the tough road? Do you take the hard road? If you're going to get to the same place, I might as well just take the easier road. And you have a lot of people, and again, well-meaning, who say, there's a better way to do that. You don't have to worry about, providing for this. We'll provide for you. We'll take care of that. We'll collectively do it. It'll be better. It'll be fair. It'll be more equal. And it's a lie. It's a lie. And the more that we give up to the government to do for us, the less free we are. And there's certain things that we do give up, and we do sacrifice our freedom for the government to do that make all the sense in the world. Collectively, to provide our security from foreign threats, that's a collective freedom. And we do give up things. We have things like the Patriot Act. We do give up some freedoms for our security. But the question is, how much are you willing to give up? Are you really willing to give up, a healthcare system in America, which is imperfect as it is the envy of the world? Nobody leaves America to get healthcare treatments. The only reason they do is because the FDA won't approve them. And you can't get them here in America because of some government bureaucracy. So you have to go someplace else to get these treatments. Otherwise, you come here. Now, other countries around the world have guaranteed this. You get your insurance card. Guaranteed, everybody gets one. Just because you have a guaranteed healthcare card doesn't mean you get healthcare. You got the card, but that doesn't mean you get the quality of care you want. Doesn't mean that you get the innovations that come with private sector enterprise. If we make healthcare a government-run enterprise, do any of you really doubt whether innovation and excellence and improvement and cures and things that could be happening, procedures that could be happening are going to slow down and stop and come to a crawl? If you look at the medical innovations in the world, the vast majority of them come from this country. Why? Because we believe in a free enterprise system. Look at PHP, free enterprise. The idea that you can go out and do it yourself, earn it, work for it, reap the fruits of your labor, and not be criticized and chastised for doing so. Look at drug companies in America. They're next to used car salesmen. Yet I suspect there are 50 people in this room who wouldn't be alive today if you weren't taking a pill. And that pill was innovated in America, almost certainly so. Now those innovations are going offshore. They're moving them. Why? Because it's too costly to do business here in America. Less and less innovation is happening as a result. Why? Because government is telling us how to run our healthcare system. And I use that as an example, but it is an example of a concrete example of how making this change, making this exchange for security in place of freedom. Benjamin Franklin said, "Those who are willing to trade freedom for security are not worthy of either." It is a mistake. You folks here in PHP, you're living on the edge, right? You're living on the edge. But you're alive, right? You're alive. I know it's scary, and there's a lot of scary things in the world. I know it's scary not to have that guaranteed whatever to make sure that you're going to be okay. But that's the greatness of a life well lived, to get into the arena, to get out there and make it yourself, and to get the satisfaction of providing for yourselves and the ones you love, and then serving those who you interact with. It's amazing. I know you feel this at PHP, of what you're accomplishing for yourself and your family, what you're doing for people that you interact with and serving them as customers and clients. That's the dynamism that makes America work. We could have a system that says, you know what, don't do that. We'll pay you a certain amount of money if you, don't do that. You're not living life. You're less than what you could be. America is all about making sure that you actualize your potential. And so I just encourage you all to think twice when the government says we can do this better. Don't believe it. Just don't believe it. The post office, the IRS, go on the list. What do they do better? They don't. You do better. Trust yourself.
Awesome. So I have one very big concern here before we wrap up for some of our guys that maybe want to pursue politics one day. Does it help in any way, or is it mandatory to wear cowboy boots to do good in business in politics?
Let me tell you the story of the cowboy boots. And I'm from Western Pennsylvania. Now, Western Pennsylvania does not mean the West. And so, no, I was not aware of cowboy boots. I've hardly ever wore them. I had a pair of cowboy boots. I've had these boots for 10 years. But I didn't wear them very often. But I was out on the campaign trail, and for those of you who followed my campaign at all, we were a low-budget campaign. I mean, I was out there, doing town hall meetings in the state of Iowa, which is the first caucus. And we ended up doing, in the course of the year, about 385 town hall meetings, anywhere averaging, the average attendance at those town hall meetings that I would do was about 10 people. As small as one, as many as probably 200. Now that's up until the last couple of weeks, things got sort of intense. But up to that, it was small. But I was out there, and I would leave the house and for about a week at a time and travel around the country on either to Iowa, to New Hampshire, South Carolina, travel around the country on commercial aircraft. And the last thing you want to do is check your luggage, right? Because you had to, the way my schedule was, as soon as I landed, I was out the door and I was just running, campaigning 16 hours a day, doing 7, 8, 9 events a day. And so what I found was after a while that, if you don't want to check your luggage and you're gone for a week, that can be tough if you have to pack 3 pairs of shoes. And so what I found was, you can wear these in a suit, case in point, blue jeans. Can't wear them in shorts. At least I can't wear them in shorts. But I don't campaign in shorts. I don't have the legs for it. So, so for me, this was the universal shoe. And so it became, I didn't have to pack shoes, so I could pack a lot more clothes. And so it became the sort of the functional way for me to be able to campaign and carry my bags onto airplanes. There you go.
I have a feeling we're going to have a lot more people wearing cowboy boots. And, again, we really, really, really sincerely appreciate you coming out and taking the time to come spend some time with us.
Well, let me just tell you, you certainly, I've enjoyed the short time that we've had together last night and today, and I just love the spirit and the enthusiasm and the energy in this room. And you
fired them up. You can stand up and send them off.
All right. Thank you for inspiring me. God bless you. Thank you so much.